Well, here we are, week 3, and I hope you are as excited about what we're going through as I am. You know, listening to God's voice is such a simple idea that seems like it should be easy to do, but in reality, it requires us to be paying close attention. God's divine call and the call of fear or pride or personal ambition can sound the same sometimes. That's why we have to stay near to God. It's why we must spend time in His Word each day. It's why we have to stay close to the Good Shepherd. Jesus cares for us. He loves us, and He only wants good things for us. When we know His voice, we're able to filter out the rest of the noise from this world and trust that what He's asking us to do is good and true. And once we hear His voice, we can act confidently on what He's asking us to do. I want to introduce you to Corey and Abby Stocksdale. Corey, Abby, and their 3 children are missionaries in Botswana, Africa, where they spend each and every day bringing the hope and truth of Christ to the Botswanan people. You might remember that last summer, we sent a team from Central there to partner with the Stockdales in beginning construction on a brand new chapel for their village. I'm excited to report that the chapel was completed and that the congregation is growing and thriving in their new worship space. I asked Corey and Abby what it was like to hear the voice of God calling them so far from home. Here's what they had to say.
Hi everyone, we are Team Stocksdale. This is Corey and I'm Abby, and we have served for the last 5.5 years in Maung, Botswana as missionaries in the southern part of Africa for Global Strategy and Church of God Ministries.
Our call into international missions really came as a surprise. From 16 years old, I knew I was called to be a youth pastor. And so I did everything possible to make that happen, and it happened. And we got to a church that we had served at for 8 years and loved it. But something was kind of changing in my calling, and I was really having trouble articulating that. And when I would tell mentors and people I trusted, they didn't quite get it. They thought I was more just trying to begin work as a senior pastor, but my calling was more complicated than that. So I spent a lot of time praying, contemplating, reading, and after a short personal retreat, I came back and I was talking to a mentor, and he told me to write down my calling. I did that, I submitted to him, and he looks at me and says, well, have you ever considered international ministry, international mission work? And I look right back at him and I say, well, not a whole lot, but I'm guessing I better go talk to my wife first. And so I went home that day. I come to Abby. I look her in the eyes thinking, I don't know how this conversation's going to go. And I say, Ab, what do you think about doing international missions work? Without a beat, she looks at me square in the eyes and says, yes, I think we should. That was something I was not ready for.
It was so uncharacteristic for me to just blurt out a yes to such a wild idea. I am a 6th generation farm girl. I'm not much on change. To move 3 hours to Danville, Illinois away from my family was a huge deal. And so to be in that moment and to be able to say yes really threw him back. And when we took a minute to really wonder why in the world I could even say yes in that moment, it was very apparent that 6 years prior at a youth convention in Orlando, Florida, we heard this lady speak. Her name was Marilyn Laszlo. She was a missionary to Papua New Guinea, and she was a farm girl from Indiana. And that night when I heard her speak, something stirred inside of me. And I looked at Corey that night and I said, I think we could do something like that one day. And then in that moment, 6 years later, because the Lord knew I needed time to prepare and get there, I could say yes to the call to the mission field.
You know, I think a lot of times it's difficult to distinguish what is the voice of God and what is a voice within us. And so I really searched for the voice of God, both in interpreting my calling, but then also in interpreting where God was calling us to go. we interviewed with the regional coordinator for Asia, and we interviewed with the regional coordinator for Africa. It felt clear as day that we should be going to Africa. But as far as what country, we had no idea. And we were given a list of countries. There hadn't been a regional coordinator in the area for a while, and the current ones were just entering the field. And so when we spoke with them, they said, I'm really sorry, but all we know is what countries ask for missionaries. We know no information. So we always tell people all we had was Google and prayer. And that threw us all over the place. But when it came down to it, as far as distinguishing God's voice, we finally decided that one of us would come and visit Botswana. And it was me. Abby wasn't able to come. We had a newborn baby at the time. And I kept asking God, please show up in some mighty way. Like, I don't want to go back and tell my wife we should do this if it's just me saying it. I need you, God. I need you to tell me. I need your voice. There are 2 times in my entire life that I can remember having a dream that I feel like were truly from God. One was when shortly after my baby brother was stillborn and passed away. The other was when I visited Botswana. And I had this crazy dream on the last night that I could have had, the last night before our last full day. And it was dark, but I could be seen. And I kept hearing these voices, all the reasons that we couldn't do this, all the doubt, all the negative things. But it was my voice saying these things, and I knew my voice, and it was me. And then I woke up in a start, and I asked myself, what was that? What was that to mean? And I interpreted it this way, right or wrong. I interpreted it as I was being my own biggest enemy, and that it was my doubt causing me to think that we couldn't do it. And so I went home and told Abby that I believed God was leading us to this. And I believed it thoroughly, and I still believe it because He has come through time and time again.
So when he came home and it was time to start fundraising and tell our families that we are going to be missionaries and move our entire family to Africa, there was a little bit of pushback, as you imagine, when you tell grandparents that you're about to take their grandchildren 8,000 miles away. And my parents are believers, but yet it was still really difficult at first to accept this news. But I knew that God was calling us to the mission field. I knew He was telling us to go to Botswana. And so difficult conversation after difficult conversation I had to have with my parents. They were kind of like, in a way, discouraging us from like continuing to pursue the call. But I was standing my ground. I was remaining obedient to what I knew that the Lord was calling us to do. And the prayer of my heart was, Lord, if we could just be on good terms with my parents before we get on the plane, like, that's all I ask. And a few months later, we were with my dad, and my dad said he wanted to talk with us, and we thought, oh boy, here comes another difficult conversation. And my dad said, I need to apologize to you guys. I've handled this whole thing as a father and a grandfather, but not as a Christian. And I see now the hand of God and what He is doing in your life. And I want to be fully supportive of you guys being missionaries and, want to be a part of sending you overseas, which totally just wrecked us in all the best of ways, with the testimony of there is freedom in forgiveness, and that God is so good and kind and faithful. Even when He calls you into something difficult, there is a glorious outcome. We've seen it again, time and time again. We have had so many health struggles while we've been on the field. I personally had to have 2 surgeries less than a year apart from one another, where I had to leave our family both times to go pursue surgery because I was really struggling. And the second surgery that I had, they actually found very minute amount of papillary carcinoma on my thyroid. In the end, it was all okay. I'm not even on medication. It's all fine. But when that surgery was over, Corey and the kids came home and we had a home assignment, and I was so fearful to return to the field. But I knew that I knew. I kept going to the Lord with my fear, and I knew that the Lord was calling us to go back. He was telling me that I needed to go back to Botswana. And so it was only on obedience that I returned from that home assignment, because I knew that God was calling me to come back, even though I didn't necessarily want to. It was very difficult for me. But that was about 1.5 years ago, and we've seen Children of Promise, like we're over 100 children now, and we're expanding to our 4th site, and a new church was built in 2023, and like there's been all of this Galatians 6:9 fruit that has come. Again, when God calls you even into difficult situations, you can trust in Him that He is faithful, and there will be a glorious outcome.
That's right. So Central has partnered with us in a couple of very big ways. Through you guys, we've been able to build 2 different church buildings here in Botswana, places that had existing congregations, but that met in really small, kind of run-down buildings. And by small, I mean like one tiny room, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet kind of room. And one wasn't even made out of brick, it was made out of straw. But most recently, you guys helped us build a church building in the village of Shirobi. And Shirobi is deep in our hearts. We absolutely love Shirobi, and we have wanted to invest more and more in Shirobi. And we actually don't even live that far, even though it's in a village. It's only about half an hour, and we had already decided we wanted to start going there more often and pursuing that church more. We love the pastor there. She lives here in Mountain as well, and she loves that church and loves those people, and so do we. And we prayed for it and wanted to see something big, and because of you guys, we were able to build this beautiful building that they are now in, and we are very hopeful as we enter this new year that they're just going to flourish because of what you guys did in your investment. You also sent a team here as a part of building that building, and that team brings us so much life we can't express to you. There are a few of them that were here both trips, and we absolutely love your people that we've gotten to meet, and they have invested a lot in us and in our children, and we can't thank you enough for your investment, both in our family and in the church here in Mountain, Botswana.
So the number one answer, and it always sounds so cliche, I know, but the number one way that individuals can support us is through prayer. It truly carries us through. It continues to drive us and encourage us to keep going. Prayer is real and it works, and the Lord is hearing them and answering them on the other side. We can testify to that. There's been times, some of the people from the trip and then from other churches as well, they reach out at just the right time, and they're like, hey, I was actually thinking about you this morning and praying for you, and we're like, and here's why. Thank you so much. And so it really is supportive when you spend time in prayer for those that you know serving around the world for the Lord. Other ways are ways that you can connect with us. We are on Facebook. If you go to Team Stocksdale, you can follow us there. We try to put updates on as often as we can with photos so you can see what's going on and the ministry happenings for Church of God Mission in Botswana. You can also go to chogglobal.org and you can search for Stocksdale, and you can find our page with global strategy there. It always has our most recent newsletter that you can read about our ministry happenings there. You can even print them, it's PDF form. And of course, there's always financial support as well. You see a big green Give Now button there, and you could always become a monthly partner or even a one-time gift if you want to give. That really helps us to be able to remain and stay on the field to do the ministry and the work that God has called us to do.
Thank you so much for your partnership, for your love, and for your encouragement. We look forward to future ways that we will partner together, and will forever be thankful for all that you have done for us and for all that you have done for Church of God Botswana. Love to you all, and may God be with you as you continue to expand His kingdom.
I am always so inspired to hear from people who have completely trusted God's voice and been faithful to His direction, and how amazing it is that we got to play a part in their work. In this season of Refresh, it is so important that we each stay close to Jesus and listen to his voice. I want you to know that we wouldn't be entering this season if God hadn't made it crystal clear. This isn't something that I'm doing, and it's not something that our church council or any of our other leaders are doing. It's all God. Our job is simply to listen to his voice and be obedient to his desires for each of us along the way. In your time together, spend a few moments reflecting on a time you heard God's voice. How did you know it was him? And what was he asking you to do? Or maybe you struggled to hear him. That's okay. I think you'll be surprised at how many others are in that same place or have been at some point in their lives. When you've listened to the voice of the Good Shepherd, how have you seen his faithfulness shine through? Enjoy your time discussing tonight. God bless you. We'll see you next week.